Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out at Cheney Ranch Motocross Track, a beautiful private facility here in Southern California, and we're getting the opportunity to ride the 2019 Honda CRF450R today. So for 2019, we're the third year into the newest generation for Honda CRF450. Of course, the 17 was the beginning of that. It was a resounding success. The last 2 years, they've done really well in shootouts and overall opinions and bike sales even. You know, Honda typically does about 4 years for a 450, so this being year 3, they're gonna cap it off with kind of a mid-generation change. And although the bodywork doesn't look any different, it's really a big frame change from the midpoint down the spars where you see that major weld. That section down through the foot pegs into the cradle is different, and the whole swing arm and the swing arm pivot area. If you actually get to see it side by side, that angle's quite a bit different. It's very noticeable. What does that relate to on the track? Well, Honda's explanation is they're changing the rigidity. And instantly people hear rigidity and go, oh, it's gonna be stiffer. Yeah, it is, but not always in a bad sense. The previous frame has been really stiff up at the front end of the bike, so it's given it really good turn in, but it's also been a little bit of a balance issue where we've tried different engine mounts. And a lot of guys, if you've seen, have been trying to kind of soften up the feel of that bike. So they've decided to change the rear section of the bike to make it stiffer, so the overall energy is transferred better throughout the chassis. On the track, this was way more noticeable than I expected. We actually rode the 19 almost all the day, let the track get really rough. Here we have a ton of outsides that are really soft and have these roller bump, like kind of these dips as you exit. The 19, your third gear off the back end, just full pegged, and it plants and it tracks through those exits. The 18, once you finally get to ride it after 19, you realize how much the 18 fishtails in these sections. It almost feels like the bike is hinged a little bit at the rear. You're trying to stay on the throttle and it's just kind of moving around and it won't stay as settled. I said, riding the 18 on its own, it's a good bike, and it wasn't, I guess, as obvious that this was an issue until we get on the new bike. It's like, okay, Honda has a direction they're going here, and it's definitely, you know, there's a good reason for it. This also ties into a little bit of the suspension. They've been jumping around. The first year, the 17, the fork was too soft. 18, they stiffened it up quite a bit, and it was maybe a little too stiff for some guys. And with all that front end stiffness, it was kind of hard to balance out. I feel like in 19, they've kind of gone in between. It's a little on the soft side again. For the standard 19 bike, because we also rode the Works Edition today. The standard 19 for me need a little bit more rebound to be held up in the deeper braking sections, and it needed just a little bit more compression to stay from bottoming out on really big square edges. But the middle to initial to me was definitely an improvement over the 18. It's more supple initially, and that really helps out. It just kind of needs a little bit more on that end stroke, but I feel like it's pretty tunable. The rear end seems to work really well with all those changes, the shock. It has a really nice settling point when you're on the throttle. It gives it a little more of a rear steer characteristic, and it just makes it a little more fun on those long corners. I will admit the one place that the 18 was maybe a little bit better is the absolute tightest inside ruts. That 18 knifes in a tad bit better with the front end feel and the balance of the chassis. But for me, the 19 really beats it head to tails when you're in that middle to exit based on the way it accelerates. Engine characteristic has changed a little bit due to some revised porting, ECU, and a big thing is they've actually changed. This bike now has a different ignition and fuel map for every single gear. So as you shift, it switches to a different engine mapping. And it just feels really crisp everywhere. It's a little more responsive and a little more lively. It gets up and goes a little bit quicker, and it gets through the mid-range a little faster. Of course, we have the 3 maps. The standard map just has a good broad range. Like I said, it's a little bit crisper, a little more lively than the standard. The second's really the smooth map. We didn't try it that much. Map 3 is really aggressive, and where map 3 to me is really good is this low mirror outside conditions. It just allows the bike to be a little bit more lively when you plant it in third. It picks up through the mid-range a little quicker, where the standard map might go a little bit flat when you load the bike. Map 3 allows it to bark a little bit more when you're just got it really loaded in that loam. But on hard pack, it could be a little bit harder to control. Outside of the 3 selectable engine maps, plus the different mapping for every single gear you shift into, is some other added electronics. In this case, a launch control, a 3-map launch control. You'll load it. When you're on the line, you hold the clutch and you actually hit the starter button again, and you'll see the light on the left turns from blue to purple, and it blinks based on the starting map you're in. Basically, same thing. You have a smooth, you have a very normal, and a really aggressive launch map. They're kind of the standard. You still have to really load the clutch and the throttle yourself. You don't peg them wide open. But it's just a nice little addition for somebody that's looking for a little bit of help getting out of the gate. Other bonuses is cutting down a little bit of weight. They've changed the cases. This is now an electric start only bike. There's no kick starter on it, so they're able to trim about 2 pounds off by really changing the engine case to adapt to that. And then a few other little things, new triple clamp that has different bar mount position, and they finally went to an 1/8" fat bar, and they also lowered it. The current Hondas had this same bar bend forever in the 7/8, and they're just kind of following the direction a lot of guys are. They've got that little bit lower bar, I think it's about 10 or 15 millimeters, and it just makes it more aggressive. When you're in that standing position, you get a little more down like the jockey, and you're able to get in a more aggressive stance that allows you to transfer your weight better around the bike. Another really cool little addition to see them bring from the HRC race side is the front brake caliper. Prior, 27mm pistons for both of them. Now they've updated to a 30 and a 27. This is a direct takeaway from their Billet Works caliper. It has a smaller piston, that 27, on the leading edge of where the rotor goes in, with the 30mm being after. And what this allows it to do is load the brake pad more evenly onto the rotors. If they're both the same, where the rotor first enters the pad, it tends to grab and pull that pad in and wear it at a little bit of an angle. With having the larger piston later, it really ensures that they're able to keep consistency and even pressure with the pad across the rotor. Overall, this just really kind of improves the braking power and the feel that you find overall. So overall, I would say the majority of this bike is a positive. I definitely like the engine characteristic better. It just still has a really good balance between being aggressive, being responsive, having a little bit of that 450 snap, having a range of power, but at the same time not being too much. The chassis is really coming along pretty interesting. I feel like the added rigidity in the rear is better in the majority of situations. Like I said, there was some tight inside stuff where I felt like the 18 might turn in a little bit different, a little bit better. But for the majority of the situations, I feel like the 19 chassis might be a bit better balanced. The only other thing that really sticks out to me is I still feel like the fork setting could get a little more dialed on this bike. I definitely feel like, for me, the 19 fork setting is the best of the three, but I still feel like there's a little more playing around with the balance of the bike due to the fork than some of the other bikes out there. Due to the adjustability of the new 49mm fork, I think a lot of people will find what they like, but it just might take a little bit of tweaking to get there. Overall, we'll see how this makes it stack up. There's a lot of improvements in the 450 class this year. I'm really excited to get into the shootouts.